And I have to say that once again, we see that NATO is with a sense of urgency and a strong sense not only of unity of purpose, but unity of action. Just at the very end of last week, Turkey approved Sweden's accession to NATO. Sweden brings tremendous capabilities to the alliance in every domain. Hungary now will have to act in order to complete the process of Sweden's accession, but I fully anticipate that that will happen in the weeks ahead when Hungary's parliament returns. Now, the accession of both Finland and Sweden was far from inevitable. In fact, if you go back a little over 2 years, no one was talking about it. But in the wake of Moscow's renewed aggression against Ukraine, both countries felt that it was clearly in their interest to defend their people and defend their sovereignty by joining the alliance. I think the process that we've seen in actually record time, first with Finland and now with Sweden, demonstrates that NATO's door is open, remains open, including to Ukraine, which will become a member of NATO. This also underscores one of the many ways in which Putin's aggression against Ukraine has been an abject strategic failure for Russia, how it has in fact precipitated the very things that Putin sought to prevent. He wanted to shrink NATO. It is now larger and getting larger still. He wanted to weaken NATO. It is stronger than it's ever been. All of this will, I think, come to...
It's stronger than it's ever been. Why is everybody urging all the NATO members to up their GDP defence spending?
An important inflection point when we get to the NATO summit, the historic NATO summit that we are very honored to host in Washington in July. This is going to be, I think, the most ambitious summit since the end of the Cold War, showing NATO's adaptation to new challenges and new threats, whether it's Russia, whether it's very different ways, the PRC, the cyber domain, terrorism. And what you're seeing is an alliance that, as I said, is coming together in new ways and in stronger ways to make sure that it can deal effectively with those challenges. And even as we're...
I'm not joking, I'm picking up like a pure tone of apprehension and uncertainty and stuff. I'm not even joking.
Celebrating, when we get to the NATO summit, 75 years of its history.
You
the
look
real
scared.
focus of the summit is going to be on the next 75 years and everything NATO has done to adapt and make itself, as it has been, indispensable to the defense and security of its members. Some of those capabilities and some of that strength was on display as we kicked off the largest NATO military exercises since the end of the Cold War. Steadfast Defender, 90,000 personnel who are sending a very clear message. This alliance is ready, and it is able to defend every square inch of NATO territory. We discussed with the Secretary General NATO's unwavering support for Ukraine. Last week, NATO signed a $1.2 billion contract to produce 220,000 artillery shells. That's going to help allies restock their own arsenals, and it complements efforts by the United States, by the European Union, by Ukraine, to ramp up defense production. This will make NATO itself
more
and
GBT,
allies,
more money for the military and Western military
forward.
Industrial complex.
As all of us take on these challenges, and I want to emphasize, in the case of Ukraine, we've seen this very, very clearly. There's probably never been a better example of burden sharing in the history of the alliance and the partnerships that we have with different countries than we see when it comes to Ukraine. As I've mentioned before, the support that the United States has provided to Ukraine has been exceptional, about $75 billion over the last couple of years, but our partners and allies, notably our core NATO allies, have provided more than $110 billion over that same period of time. And whether it's military support, whether it's economic support, whether it's humanitarian support, the burden sharing that we've seen in the case of Ukraine has been more than exemplary. But in order to make sure that that continues, that all of us step up and do what's necessary to continue to ensure that Ukraine knows success and Russia knows strategic failure, it is vital that Congress pass the supplemental budget request the President's put before it. Without it, simply put, everything that Ukrainians achieved and that we've helped them achieve will be in jeopardy. And
Ukraine has
absent
achieved
that
fuck
supplemental,
all.
we're going to be sending
Ukraine is minus achievement. Actually, they've lost territory.
a strong and wrong message to all of our adversaries that we are not serious about the defense of freedom, the defense of democracy. And it will simply reinforce for Vladimir Putin that he can somehow outlast Ukraine and outlast us.
He can. Western elements are all skint. Energy crisis because we're not getting cheap gas into Germany for Russia anymore. That's been cut off. It's a war of attrition. I think that's the right way. And we're losing and Russia's winning.
Well, that's not going to be the case. We have to make sure that it's not the case. Finally,
Yep, eat your
let me
babies,
just say that we have a
folks.
lot of work to do over the next few months to prepare for the summit. I think we had today very good sessions with the Secretary General, and we'll be meeting shortly with the National Security Advisor and the Secretary of Defense over at the Pentagon to continue that work. I look forward to that and look forward to the weeks and months ahead as we prepare for NATO summit. Jens, over to you.
Thanks so much, Secretary Blinken there.
For
Tony,
sure.
thank you for hosting me here in
Oh, yeah,
Washington.
for
It
sure.
is always good to meet
Just
with
another
you.
log in the sauna.
And even more
for sure.
important given the dangers we face. So let me begin by offering my deepest
For
condolences for the US troops killed and wounded
Good
in
dudes.
yesterday's drone attack in Jordan. We see Iran continue to
Was it in Jordan?
destabilize the
Was it in
region.
Jordan?
Iran also bears responsibility for backing terrorists who attack ships in the Red Sea. Tehran's behavior reminds us of what a world without rules look like. Unpredictable and dangerous, a world where our security becomes more expensive.
Here's a rule for you. They're asking you, predominantly America, but the West in general, to stop giving them, as it's getting said on the, I say love bombs and bullets, but it's getting talked about as munitions. Israel couldn't continue this without outside support. It'd be dead already. The Arab world would have fucking crushed it. Man. Stop the love bombs and bullets, stop the war. Be all sides, easy peasy.
Welcome your tireless diplomacy, Secretary Blinken, to prevent further escalation of the war in Gaza. Your efforts to alleviate human suffering and your hard work towards a peaceful resolution. Russia's brutal war against Ukraine is nearing the 2-year mark. And a Russian victory would embolden Iran, North Korea, and China. That matters for Europe's security, and it matters for America's security. So supporting Ukraine serves US interests. For a tiny fraction of annual defense spending, the United States has helped Ukraine destroy a major part of Russia's combat capacity, without placing a single American soldier in harm's way.
I need to make sure my mic's on. Yeah, by using all the dumbass Ukrainians, the same way that the crazy ass Christian motherfuckers have turned all the stupid Jews into a standing army against the Muslims, just between the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and fucking Muslimdom.
I welcome the clear commitment from President Biden and you to sustain US support to Ukraine and to work with Congress to achieve that. As you said, other allies are also stepping up. In fact, what European NATO allies and Canada provide in terms of military, financial, and humanitarian aid actually exceeds what the US is providing. So this is truly a joint effort by all NATO allies from both sides of the Atlantic. And I'm confident that all NATO allies will continue to deliver, because supporting Ukraine is not charity. It is an investment in our own security. President Putin started this war, and he could end it today if he stopped attacking a neighbor. The war could also end if Ukraine stopped.
Putin didn't start this war. The war was started with the European Union under the behest of the West in general, but NATO as well, to keep or to push Russia. Crimea is so strategically important for Russia, it would never give it up in a month of Sundays. The European Union, the West, made a move for Ukraine through Maidan, dressing it up as getting rid of Yanukovych, because I think he was the new Hitler at the time. People forget this shite. It was economics, because Ukraine was going to move its economy to be geared towards the Russian Federation and not the European Union. As soon as that happened, the democratically elected leader of Yanukovych became the bad guy, and Maidan happened with paramilitary forces ousting them. That's how the war started. Then Russia realised what was going on, and they done what they done in Crimea, because Crimea was never up for negotiation. They would never have let that go for military strategic purposes that I've fucking went into before. It's their only warm water port. This is sheer fabrication. This is like pulling it out your fucking ass. Russia started this conflict. No, they didn't. No, they didn't. They didn't bring the fucking violence to the table. Maidan did, which was orchestrated by the West, America, European Union entities that all wanted to fucking become leeches on the arse of Ukrainians' economy and rip it away from the Russian Federation, thus weakening the Russian Federation. And it's turned into a quagmire, just like Syria did. Syria is, still is, so on, so forth. Anyway, let's get back to the bullshit.
Defending itself. But that would not mean peace. It would mean Russian occupation. And occupation is not peace. A just peace will require President Putin to realize that he will not get what he wants on the battlefield. Moscow must accept a negotiated solution where Ukraine prevails.
What about in Syria? What about Syria? Putin got what he wanted on the battlefield in Syria.
As a sovereign, independent nation. What
Same with
happens
Syria.
around the negotiating table is inextricably linked to the situation on the battlefield.
Syria is a sovereign, independent nation, and the US has bases inside Syria. But that doesn't get mentioned as occupation or an invasion or anything of the sort. It's fighting random Abdul armies that have a different name every fucking week.
So if we want a lasting, just peace, we must provide Ukraine with more weapons and ammunition. Weapons to Ukraine is the path to peace.
1984, bitches. Weapons are the path to peace. My fucking lord, am I hearing this? Am I hearing this? Zeke Howe, you fucking Nazi fucking moron. Weapons, blowing people's heads off, are the way to fucking peace. You know, I'm surprised John Lennon was the sporting an AK-47 in that poster. That's ridiculous. Weapons are the way to peace. Up is down, left is right, black is white. And far right, it's not far right, it's just right. Fuck me, man.
Finally, we also discussed adapting our lines for the future. In July, we will mark NATO's 75th anniversary with a summit here in Washington. And as you said, NATO is getting stronger and bigger. Finland is already a member. Sweden will become a member soon. And this demonstrates that
Go and look at your
Putin is
map.
getting exactly the opposite of what he wanted.
He's getting exactly the opposite what NATO promised Gorbachev at the early 90s at the wind up of the Cold War. When NATO says, we won't expand east. Boom shakalaka, we're right on their fucking borders. Ukraine on Russia's border. Finland, Russia's border. Sweden has a Bohemia border, or is it Norway? I think it's Norway actually. But Sweden swears a kind of maritime border with Russia at Kaliningrad in the Baltic Sea. This is absolute fucking. See if you know where you're coming from. This is gobbledygook shite. I'm no fan of fucking Putin's. I'm no swaying to one way or the other. Putin's as full of shit as the next man. They're all playing their fucking part in this fucking information war. But, like, they'd stand up and try and pass yourself off the bashing of freedom of speech and all that's right, and then just lie. People with a couple of brain cells that fucking ain't succumbed to the tickety talk, the shitty talk. I saw fucking concentration span yet. Can remember stuff.
He wanted less NATO, a weaker NATO. He's getting a stronger and more united NATO, and NATO with more members. At the summit, we will take further steps to bolster NATO's strength, invest more in our defense, and work with partners around the world. Through NATO, the US has more friends and allies than any other power. Together, we make up 50% of the world's economic and military might. China and Russia have
50%.
nothing like NATO. It is why they always try to undermine our unity. In times of growing competition and rivalry, NATO makes the US stronger and safer.
You can go into the numbers, so on and so forth. I've went into the numbers of standing army and all that kind of shit, right? But monetarily speaking, NATO, the West, especially America, blow the rest out the water.
And all of us more secure. So Secretary Blinken, dear Tony, thank you again for your personal commitment to our transatlantic bond.
But just ask Robert D. Burns, Robert de Bruce, about whether it's all about your fur coat or do you need some knickers to go with it.
And to our shared security. Thank you.
For the first question, Olivia Gazis with CBS.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you, Mr. Secretary. To date, the United States has not publicly accused Iran of being directly involved in any attacks on U.S. forces, while noting the regime in Tehran supports and does not discourage its proxies from conducting these attacks. This weekend's lethal strike, Mr. Secretary, was one of at least 160 attacks on U.S. forces in the region by Iranian proxies since October. Could earlier, stronger action by the United States against Iran, and not just its militias, have spared American lives? And secondly, if I may, Mr. Secretary, the UN Secretary General has appealed to the U.S. and 10 other countries who have suspended funding to UNRWA, following revelations regarding allegations that at least a dozen of its 13,000 employees may have had involvement in the October 7th attacks, and more than 100 more may have links to militant groups. Under what circumstances and how soon could the U.S. consider resuming its support, considering this decision comes?
First question, loaded question, talking about this new shit coming about this organisation who supports the Palestinians in aid. No doubt they do other shit like all these aid agencies and shit. Whether these allegations are real, fake, mustered up or whatnot, it's like pointing at the BBC and calling everybody that works for the BBC a pedo. The BBC's a massive institution, thousands of people working for it, man. Statistically speaking, you're going to have fucking X amount of fucking X, Y, and Zs in the workforce. Same applies to these fucking motherfuckers. And this is when it comes down to an information war. It's a PR campaign, isn't it?
As Gaza is tipping into famine, and given your own personal and persistent appeals, that humanitarian aid to Gazan civilians increase and not decrease? Mr. Secretary General, welcome to Washington. Welcome back. The United States Congress, as you well know, remains at a political impasse regarding continued aid to Ukraine, and the European Union is likewise struggling politically to restart the flow of resources into Kyiv. You yourself have said that Ukraine's spring offensive didn't lead to the results that many had hoped for. So how long does Ukraine's military have before the marginal successes that it did notch, when it enjoyed steadier resources from the West, risk being reversed by Russia, which seems to be enjoying growing support from the likes of North Korea and Iran? And briefly, Mr. Secretary General, I understand you'll be meeting with American lawmakers during this trip to Washington, much as President Zelensky
You
did
fucking
when he
10
was
million
here late
questions
last year.
worth.
Is there a message you believe you can deliver to those lawmakers to make a timely difference in their decision-making? Thank you.
Olivia, thank you very much, and thank you for also representing all your colleagues and making sure that you asked all their questions as well. Appreciate it.
Exactly, fucking bitch.
Look, first, I think it's very important to note that this is an incredibly volatile time in the Middle East. I would argue that we've not seen a situation as dangerous as the one we're facing now across the region since at least 1973, and arguably even before that. And that is the environment in which we're operating, and of course that was triggered by the horrific attacks of October 7th by Hamas against innocent women and children.
Yes. It was triggered by the Balfour Declaration and the Western powers taking over that area of the world, using genocide and ethnic cleansing, while all the time hiding behind fucking the mantra of fucking the Holocaust. Which was ethnic cleansing and genocide. It's mental. 1984, motherfuckers. Welcome.
Made very, very clear from day one that we're going to defend our people, we're going to defend our personnel, we're going to defend our interests. And that's exactly what we've done. We've taken action in significant.
In Syria, we've been hitting the people that have been attacking ISIS inside Syria, our allies. That's right, folks. ISIS, ISIL, Daesh, Western allies, Israeli Western allies. So it came out in the wash, man. There's no... The West are getting upset that fucking Iran and fucking Syria and Pakistan are hitting these motherfuckers. And you're like, well, why are you upset they're hitting these Abdul armies? They're our allies.
In action to deter groups, to degrade their capabilities in Iraq, in Syria, in Yemen.
This guy does
At
not
the same
instill
time, the President's been
confidence
very
at
clear
all.
that we want to prevent broader escalation. We want to prevent this conflict from spreading. So we are intent on doing both. That is, standing up for our people when they're attacked, while at the same time working every single day to prevent the conflict from growing and spreading. And that's exactly what we'll continue to do. It's fundamentally what's in the interest of the United States, what's in the interests of the region, and I think what's in the interest of the world. But the President
it's a
said
world
this,
war
I think,
then.
virtually from day one, to anyone who would try to
All
use
these
the
wars
crisis in the Middle
are
East,
beneficial
conflict in
for the
Middle
world.
East, to sow
Maybe you
further
could define
instability
that as a world war.
and to use it as an excuse to attack our personnel. We will respond. We will respond strongly. We will.
Your personnel occupying foreign countries. There's some speculation out there that this recent attack wasn't inside Jordan. It was actually inside Syria. And the spin would make sense in the essence that the attack happened, the deaths happened. United States have to respond because there's coffins going home. A good amount of them, by all accounts. Brain damage and all sorts of shit. But they don't want it to be the narrative that, well, hold on. They attacked an American base inside Syria. Last week they were attacking ISIS bases. Now it's an American base inside Syria. I thought Syria had been fucking finished with. I thought season 3 of Syria was the last one. Is Netflix recommissioned Syria? I don't know. This guy is like a fucking wet fucking wipe, man. He just get no installs no
Respond
confidence
at a
whatsoever.
time and place of our choosing. And obviously, I'm not going to telegraph what we might do in this instance or get ahead of the
Telegram it,
president,
man.
but
We've all
I
got
can
Telegram
again tell
now.
you that, as the president said yesterday, we will respond. And that response could be multi-leveled, come in stages, and be sustained over time. With regard to UNRWA, the reports that we got last week, and UNRWA brought them to us, were deeply, deeply troubling. It is imperative that UNRWA immediately, as it said it would, investigate, that it hold people accountable as necessary, and that it review its procedures. I had a very good conversation with Secretary General of the United Nations, Guterres, last week when we were first made aware of these allegations, and we're going to be looking very hard at the steps that UNRWA takes, again, to make sure that this is fully and thoroughly investigated, that there's clear accountability, and that as necessary, measures are put in place so that this doesn't happen, again, assuming the allegations are fully borne out. Certainly, we haven't had the ability to investigate them ourselves, but they are highly, highly credible. At the same time, and as you indicated, UNRWA has played and continues to play an absolutely indispensable.
A Jew told me, and he was like, "Why you with my bagels over here? I made you laugh last season in the Seinfeld over here." So that's why it's credible. You know, what's also credible is this story was very fucking convenient. Very fucking convenient. That's credible. Arseholes in war times make shit up. Credible. The unacceptance or the inability to admit, acknowledge, accept, fucking even a nod and a wink to the fact that yes, all sides are fucking lying. This could be bullshit. You know, I'm pretty sure ITN get put up the other day for fucking filming that somebody they just interviewed getting shot while he was waving a white flag, and that getting apparently ITN is now editing shit together when all they done was ran a piece like that. Here, the guy we were just interviewed just gets shot. Beautiful, beautiful. Anyway, let's listen to this prick. Bring back the hoot. In fact, I think that hoothy shouty guys get it down. Maybe fucking this cunt should take a lead. He put me to sleep.
Role in trying to make sure that men, women, and
Yeah,
children
we
who
a
so
wee
desperately
fucking
need assistance
suntan
in
about him as
Gaza
well, man.
actually get
Looks
it.
a wee bit dead.
And no one else can play the role that UNRWA's been playing. Certainly not in the near term.
Even worse
no one
with my
has
sunglasses off.
the reach, the
Less
capacity,
cutlery looks
the
more
structure to do what UNRWA's been
pale.
doing. And from our perspective, it's important, more than important, imperative that that role continues. So that only underscores the importance of UNRWA tackling this as quickly, as effectively, and as thoroughly as possible, and that's what we're looking for.
I will meet members of Congress tomorrow, and of course I'm looking forward to discussing many issues with them, including Ukraine. I'm confident that all NATO allies, also the United States, will continue to provide support to Ukraine, because this is in our own security interest to do so. It will be a tragedy for the Ukrainians if President Putin wins, but it will also make the world more dangerous and all of us more insecure. It will embolden other authoritarian leaders, not only President Putin, but also North Korea, Iran, and China, to use force. Today it's Ukraine, tomorrow it could be Taiwan.
Ah!
It is in our
Nailed
interest
it!
to ensure
Fucking
that Ukraine
nailed it!
prevails as a
That's
sovereign
your
independent nation. And the support we are providing
Shittity talk!
is making
We're
difference.
coming for
With the
you,
sending of
motherfucker!
ammunition weapons from NATO allies. And we have
Fucking
seen
nailed
that
it.
this support has
Told you I'm a clairvoyant.
enabled the Ukrainians to actually make big achievements. We have to remember where we started. When this war started, or when the full-fledged invasion happened in February last year, or in 2022.
War started
most
with my
experts
Dan.
feared
You
that,
fucking
Russia
smurging, burging, herging,
controlled,
gergen. No,
Kyiv
you're
within
back to
days
my
and,
IKEA.
and the whole of
Smurging,
Ukraine
herging,
within
burging,
weeks.
shunken, burger,
The
durber,
reality is that the
burging.
Ukrainians were able to push back the Russian forces, and they
Look at the body language of these fuckers. Right, at least this cunt looks like he's fucking visited Tommy Robinson's sunbed shop a few times at least. Right, he doesn't look like he's fucking Morticia Adams, is it Morticia? Wensley Adams? I can't remember. The fucking corpse looking bitch. But he's like, Smurgaburger, eat the bit meatballs and the gravy. For sure with the Vikings for North, for Jürgenbergen, Hergen, the meatballs and the gravy.
have liberated 50% of the territory that Russia occupied at the beginning of the war. They have been able to inflict.
Would that be the 20 million Russians that died beating the Nazis? 20 million for sacrifices. You get nothing. He's back Germany and everything.
Heavy losses on the Russian armed forces, more than 300 casualties, thousands of armored vehicles have been destroyed, and hundreds of planes. And this is something we all have achieved without putting any NATO soldier, US soldier or any other NATO soldier in harm's way.
Choo-choo, baby! We've left it to the Jews. We've left it to the fucking Jews in Ukraine and the fucking Ukrainians. And the dumbass mercenaries for your neck of the wood. We've no technically had to put any of our people in the harm's way. Jobs are good, gen bitches. Again, look who's dying. Look who's dying, man. In their droves. And where it's getting orchestrated for.
But just by providing military support to Ukraine. And Ukrainians have been able to open the western part of the Black Sea to push the Russian Black Sea fleet to the east. So they're now able to export grain and other commodities through the Black Sea.
That's why Crimea is so fucking important. Your own Crimea, you run the Black Sea. Russia has had fuck, I'm acting as if I don't have the internet here. Crimea, Russia. You'll get obviously. I say obviously it'll be fucking heavily. Crimea Peninsula. It's not the first Crimean War, you know. By the Black Sea, the Sea of Azov. The peninsula connects the peninsula to Ukraine, mainland Ukraine to the east. Crimean Bridge, constructed in 2018, spans the Strait of Kerch, linking the peninsula and Russia. Right, the history. Name. English omissions definition Crimea. Spelling Crimea comes from the Italian 17th century. Tauric Peninsula in the course of the 19th century in English language use of the early modern period. The Crimean Khanate is referred to as Tartia. Today the Crimean Tartar name of the peninsula is Kurm. City of Old Crimea, served as the capital of the Crimean province. The Arab writer recounted the political fight. 14th century resulted in the rivals. Right, well, that would be about the time of the Vikings rocking up and all that shit as well. Ottoman, so it was part of the Ottoman Empire back in the day. The Muslims. Another classic name for Crimea. It's been watered down to the name was revived by the Russian Empire during the massed Hellenization of Crimean Tatar place names after the annexation of the Crimean Khanate, including both the peninsula and mainland territories now in Ukraine's Kherson and Zaporozhia's obelisks. In 1764, imperial authorities established that gaff and recognised it to be the Tardia government in 1802, where the Soviets replaced it with Crimea, depriving it of all official status in 1921. It's still used by some institutions in Crimea, such as the Tardia National University, established by the Crimean Regional Government in 1918. Can help, right? Ancient history. This is maybe where I want to go. Greek colony. As part of the Roman Empire. And around the time of Christ. Greek. Byzantine. It's kind of like the Greek Empire back in the day. The Kievan Rus, they were the Rus Vikings. Mongol conquests. Russian Empire. In 1774, the Ottoman Empire was defeated by the Catherine the Great with the Treaty of that gaff, making the Tartars of the Crimea politically independent. Catherine the Great incorporation of the Crimea in 1783 onto the Russian Empire increased Russia's power in the Black Sea area. So you could argue Russia's claim over that wee bit of the world goes back to the 18th century. If you go and look who Catherine the Great is, stick in Catherine the Great and Queen Victoria, and you'll see how they were all fucking intermingling, shagging. Again, it's not just as simple as saying it's Russian or Ukrainian. It's been Russian for a couple hundred years. Strategically very important since that time, especially even back then where your navy was even more important than it is nowadays. But anywho, where was we? It's not.
Substantial achievements, and they continue to conduct deep strikes on Russian positions. So this idea that it doesn't help them, actually the Ukrainians have proved the opposite. Then of course we all would like to have seen more progress in the offensive, but we should not underestimate the achievements the Ukrainians have already made. And if we want an end to this war, the only way to end this war is to convince Putin that he will not win on the battlefield. And the only way to achieve that is to provide weapons to Ukraine.
Billions of dollars into Ukraine and a fucking quagmire while we all starve to death while we kind of heat our hussies.
Deal for NATO, for the United States, for all of us. Then...
No going cold in Russia.
One more question, I think.
There's no energy crisis in Russia.
Well, also wars are by nature unpredictable, but the only thing we know is that we need to continue to support them, and I'm confident that we will do so. And also when we meet here in Washington, I'm confident that allies will again commit to sustain their support for
To try and
Ukraine.
give us more money, motherfucker. We
Katrina
want more
Perry with
guns.
BBC.
Thank you, Katrina Perry with BBC News. Mr. Secretary, if I could just follow up on my colleague's comments there. You referred to a multi-staged response to yesterday's attack. Do you hold Iran directly responsible? Do you consider the US to be at war or on the verge of war at this point? And what impact would any response have on the hostage ceasefire deal, which we're told is at an advanced stage at this point? And Mr. Secretary General, if I could ask you what NATO's view is of the risk of the US becoming involved in a direct conflict with Iran, what that means for NATO's other priorities, including Ukraine, and on the risk to further US funding of Ukraine. Can NATO and other allies, including the EU, keep Ukraine going without the US if they need to do that? And just on the point of EU and European countries, on the issue of Sweden and Hungary holding out on its ratification of membership, do you think, is that forthcoming soon? And what does that mean for future expansion of NATO? Thank you.
Thank you. So the attacks that have taken place since October on our forces, on our personnel, in both Iraq and Syria, have been conducted by groups that are aligned with Iran, and indeed are supported by Iran, funded by Iran, equipped by Iran. And
Just like ISIS with the West.
I would note that the presence of our forces in both Iraq and Syria has nothing to do with Gaza, nothing to do with the conflict that's taken place since October 7th. It's the horrific attacks by Hamas, and everything to do with making sure that ISIS doesn't reemerge. That's why they're there.
What the fuck are you talking about, mate? You fucking fell out with Iran and Syria for hitting ISIS. Fucking this is where people's heads get. Look at his face.
There, something that.
It's like seriously, it's like somebody looking at you like, oh, you going to believe this shit? Like, the reason we have troops in Syria, they don't want us there, and Iraq, they don't want us there, is to stop ISIS, who up until a few weeks ago, until they started getting bombed again, weren't they doing Sweet Fanny Adams? And then the last time they did fucking surface, they were bombing targets in Iran. And then before that, they were kind of bombing enemies, the Sunni Shiite fucking divide of the West. Mental, stupid, windy-licking Abdul armies.
Iran
Conducted by fucking
share as an interest, but
West
on the
and
contrary,
Israeli
the groups that are aligned with
interests.
it have been conducting these attacks. And as I mentioned, we do not seek conflict with Iran. We do not seek war with Iran, but we have and we will continue.
They don't seek conflict with Iran. I'm going to continue to show this if I can find it. Because they don't seek conflict with Iran. It must just be coincidence that Iran's last on the list. Stick all those countries in at your Googles. Go and look what's happening in all these countries. They ain't stable, normal, functioning countries. The project for a new American century. This is where a lot of this neocon, these are the good guys, these are the bad guys, we're going to go after the bad guys shit came from. Anywho.
To defend our personnel and to take every action necessary to do that, including responding very vigorously to the attack that just took place. And as I mentioned,
Doesn't he look like he believes the shit?
I'm not going to get ahead of where the president is. I'm certainly not going to telegraph the response, but as I mentioned, that response could well be multi-leveled, it could come in stages, and it could be sustained over time. At the same time, totally separately, we have been working to try to get hostages back out of Gaza, and at the same time to get an extended pause in. And that effort is something that we are very, very actively pursuing right now with, of course, our partners in Qatar and Egypt, as well as Israel. Those who are trying to expand the conflict, broaden the conflict, escalate the conflict, they may
Israel
say that they're doing that somehow
try to
in
drag
response
America
to
in
Gaza,
and start fucking
but
killing
every
their
action they're
fucking
taking really is to perpetuate
enemies, and they might
the
be
conflict,
conducting all the
and
Abdul armies
and
which
to
are hitting
expand it.
America.
They don't
America
have the
will know
interests
that.
of anyone in mind except their own interests as they see them. And
reality
we're
is
determined
perception.
again that we do everything possible not to see the conflict expand. On the contrary, we're working to end it, and end it in a way that the atrocities of October 7th never happen again, as well as the suffering that we've seen on the part of Israelis and Palestinians alike doesn't happen again. That's what we're working toward, and that's where our focus is.
First, on the issue of Swedish membership, I welcome, of course, that Turkey now has finalized the ratification process with the decision in the parliament and also the signature from President Erdogan. This demonstrates that Turkey has followed up and delivered on what we all promised at the NATO summit in Vilnius last summer, and it demonstrates that NATO's door is open. I spoke last week with Prime Minister Orban of Hungary, because now Hungary is the only country that has not yet finalized the ratification process. Prime Minister Orban was very clear that he supports Swedish membership of NATO. He told me that the parliament in Hungary will reconvene at the end of February, and I expect also, in line with what he said, that the parliament will then finalize the ratification shortly after that. So I'm confident that Sweden will be a full member of the alliance. That will make NATO stronger. It will send a clear message to Moscow, and it will demonstrate that it's for NATO allies to decide who is going to be a member. Moscow have no veto over NATO enlargement. Then on Iran, of course, Iran is responsible for destabilizing the whole region, threatening stability and security in the Middle East. It is repressive at home and aggressive abroad. We have seen this through many different attacks, and also the different proxy groups, terrorist groups that Iran supports. This underlines, of course, also the risk of escalation, and therefore welcome the efforts by the United States to address these risks. And it is important that we also realize that Russia and Iran are now aligning more and more. Russia is more and more dependent on drones from Iran. They actually built a new factory in Russia based on Iranian drone technology, and in return Russia is providing advanced technology to Iran. So it demonstrates how authoritarian regimes are now coming closer and closer, and the only answer to that is that NATO allies, all those countries that believe in democracy,
We
have
getting
to
a
stand
cop
together
train
as
too.
we do in
Get
NATO.
closer and closer.
Alex Marquardt with CNN.
A very good evening. We have been watching a live press conference in Washington, the US Secretary of State
fuck.
Antony Blinken with the NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, giving us their response to the attack this weekend in Jordan, in which those 3 US service members were killed. Waiting patiently, our panel this evening, Kelly Hyman, Democratic strategist and lawyer, and also with us this evening, Christopher Steele, former head of the
Well,
Russia
I've
desk
been
at
recording
MI6
this, so that will be the
and,
press
director
conference
of
will go up,
Orbis
but let's hear
Business
what they say.
Intelligence. Welcome to you both. Thank you for
Talking
your
heads.
patience standing by for us. Can we just pick up a couple of the things that we just heard there from Secretary Blinken, Kelly? With respect to the Middle East, he says we will be actively pursuing a pause in the fighting, which I'm guessing is for a domestic audience. And the other point he made, no one has the reach of UNRWA in Gaza. We need to put them in charge. They need to tackle as effectively and as quickly as possible who they have working for them. Pick up those 2 points for me.
Well, the U.S. always believes in democracy, and we always believe the fact that other countries are our allies and want to work towards peace, especially in the Middle East, and definitely that is key, to have a peaceful resolution. But it's also important to note the fact that people need to be accountable for their actions, and that there could be potential ramifications of potential actions of harm to people throughout the U.S. and beyond.
This fact that they're actively pursuing the peace, though, we've seen the protests in some of Joe Biden's recent rallies, recent campaign events. Lise was making the point in the last hour that actually President Biden has found himself in a situation where he doesn't have enough leverage over the Israelis at the moment. Do you think the message that they are, as they were in Paris this weekend, working towards a longer humanitarian pause is for a domestic audience, for Democrat supporters?
Definitely think that that is important, but not only for Democratic supporters, but supporters throughout other countries as well. U.S. supports Israel, and they've made that very, very clear that they are allies.
Why you only with fucking the love bombs and bullets to keep this shit going?
Hopefully, there will be some type of peaceful resolution soon rather than later.
I thought, Chris, it was interesting what he said about their response to Iran. It will be multi-level, he said, staged and sustained over time. What did you make of that?
Well, it's obviously been very difficult, Christian, for America to get much leverage over Iran through sanctions and so on.
Sorry, man, I meant to throw that. When it's kicked off, I should have thrown it up live.
And of course, now allied
it'll
very
be on
closely
the
with
channel
Russia
after the fact.
in a joint practice of such a type. So I think that it is true that sanctions work, economic sanctions work, but also we have to look at the wider
especially
spread
when
of
you
this conflict. And the fact is,
critically
that
think
we are
about
up
it, for
against
lack of
group
a
authoritarian
fucking
countries who are
throwaway
increasingly
term
closely
to
aligned and who are determined to
critically think
undermine
about.
the rule of law and democracy. And someone like Vladimir Putin
Our
has a
law,
vested interest now
our
in
democracy.
stirring up any
You know, you walk
conflict in
into
the
a
world
room,
he
tell
can
every cunt
in
and go,
order to take
I'm the only
attention and
democracy
effort and
here.
resources
Let's have a vote.
away
Oh,
from
I'm
Ukraine,
in.
which should be our priority, certainly in Europe.
Yeah,
Welcome to
it was
Western
interesting you made
democracies.
specific reference, Chris, to Russia and Iran aligning on drone technology.
If there was
and
green men on the
swapping
moon, we would have
technology.
killed them all.
Russia lending
Planted
Iran
their flag and went,
more
"This is
advanced
yours."
technology in recent months. Do you see evidence of that?
The way the world.
Yes, I think not just Iran, but also North Korea. You know, it is incredible, really, that North Korea is supplying Russia with weapons at the moment, which breaks a UN embargo and should really lead to some punitive action against Russia.
Breaks a UN embargo.
Under
How many
international law and
fucking
international
UN
community.
laws?
And at the moment,
You
we're
pick
not
and
really
choose
seeing
what
that. One
UN
of the
laws you
problems,
want to
I think,
abide
is
by.
that with all
Ask
these
Israel to
conflicts
abide
breaking
by
out around the
UN
world in different
recommendations and
regions,
fucking
some of the
laws about
focus
the
is being
occupied
taken
West
off the
Bank
really
and
bad
Gaza,
perpetrators
etc.,
like Russia and
etc.,
North Korea,
etc.
who are not being held accountable.
Well, in the course
Not
of
being
that
held
press
accountable.
conference, you
Nobody's
will have heard the
holding
US Secretary of
fucking
State say
Israel
potential
fucking
Congress passes
accountable,
without
you
delay
fuck.
the aid package for Ukraine. Mr. Blinken said absent funding, all gains would be in jeopardy in Ukraine, and the US would be sending the world a message that it's no longer serious about defending freedom and democracy around the world.
Is one
The House
boring.
Republicans, you'll recall, have been
Nobody's got no
delaying that
gravitas
$60
at
billion
all.
aid package for Ukraine, aid which many of them do support, by yoking the deal to the crisis at the Mexican border. A bipartisan agreement on an immigration deal was reached over the weekend. The top Republican negotiating it says the proposal could be on the floor by the end of the week.
Do not have a vote count yet on this because everybody's got to be able to read
How
it.
have
to be
they
able to go through,
wrapped
but I
up
do feel very
Ukraine
positive
and
about it
fucking
because even the
immigration? This
initial
is
feedback
beautiful.
has been good.
Trouble is, having called for this urgent action at the border, Donald Trump is now telling Republicans he doesn't want the deal that's being negotiated, even though it probably is one of the most far-reaching conservative package of measures that's been negotiated in 30 years.
I'd rather have no bill than a bad bill. A bad bill you can't have, and that's what was happening. Mike Johnson, Speaker, he just said it's dead on arrival in the House. It's dead on arrival. We want either a strong bill or no bill, and whatever happens, happens.
Well, the standoff in Washington coincides with a similar problem here in Europe. This week, EU leaders are due to meet in Brussels to approve 50 billion euros of aid for Ukraine, which was vetoed in December by the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban.
Do you know who's setting up Christian white-only enclaves in Hungary? That would be Mike Dowson, Nick Griffin, and the Skeletor that remains of the BNP. And if I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, but if I'm right, Tommy Robinson's still running about, being part of that apparatus. I may be wrong. Who knows? Maybe I'm right.
Here's a little of what he said in December, just before that veto.
To give money to Ukraine is easy to do because in short term the money for Ukraine is already in the budget. So there is no any extra decision to give it in short term. In long term and the bigger sum of money, my position is that we should give it outside.
Well, Orban is perhaps President Putin's closest ally here in Europe, promising to exercise his veto again, in spite of threats coming from the Commission. So Ukraine is having to ration its use of artillery and focus instead on the one area where it has the edge, its drone production. Both sides have been using drones extensively, but Kyiv now appears to have developed technically sophisticated...
Oh man, this is just a rich man's warfield, isn't it? It's just using the new technologies to see fucking get a wee fucking snifter of how they work in real life situations, isn't it?
Long distances and strike deep into Russian territory. And in the past 3 weeks, there's been a determined effort to hit Russia's energy infrastructure. In one attack, they attached explosives to train carriages in the Ural city of Nizhny. A blast took place next to facilities owned by Gazprom, the country's third biggest oil producer. There was a kamikaze drone crash into an oil depot in the Oryol region. And the week before last, an oil terminal in St. Petersburg, which of course is Putin's home city, also came under attack. So let's bring in Patrick Bury, an associate professor in security at Bath University. And I'm sure you've been listening to the Secretary General in the last few minutes, Patrick. So this is all very timely. That scenario that I've just set out, with the Ukrainians reaching deep into Russian territory using this advanced drone technology, is that incidental, or is it part of a determined effort now to try and disrupt the wealth, really, of Russia, the money that is funding the war?
Good evening. I think it's absolutely part of a determined strategy and an emerging strategy to target Russian energy infrastructure and indeed its industrial capacity. Quite aside from the attacks we've seen in the last 3 weeks, they've been harassing.
Everybody that has,
I mean, there's a lot of Russian production outside of the ranges of these as well. But
everybody that has joined live, I'm sorry, man, I missed the fucking majority of the, well, pretty much during this live stream, the whole press conference.
As well too, that,
I'm acting like
but you can see how when Ukraine
the BBC iPlayer, which I could rewind it all, but I did just sit and watch it all while recording it. So sub, bell up, and it'll be up my channel in no time at all.
More difficult. One of the interesting things seen on.
Oh, what am I having flashbacks to? Like it's a Hollywood film, like Battle of the Drones. Was it Star Wars or something? Warfare of the Drones or some shit? Was it Terminator? It's on the tip of my tongue. I'll get there. But that's happening, folks. It's 2014, man. You get Russia and Ukraine, Russia versus the West, and all this crazy ass new drone technology getting rolled out in mass capacity. The US just lost a few of their servicemen to a kamikaze drone. So drone warfare seems to be what's getting tested out in the testing fields. Some would call them no man's land, but I think that's misogyny. misogynistic. So let's just call them fucking drone land. Get it? Got it. Good. I mean, Bill, sub up, you'll get the whole press conference, or a fair bit of it that I managed to catch. Alrighty, boob tubes, get it, got it, good. Cat cheese. No cats or cheese. Or commies were harmed in this filming. Fair bit of it that I managed to catch. Alrighty, boob tubes, get it, got it, good. Cat cheese. No cats or cheese. Or commies were harmed